Hi, I'm Jeanne Heald. I'm up here from Columbus tonight, so thank you for having me. And I'm here to talk about all the letters of the alphabet. So I think the one thing that we all share up here in common today is the idea about educating, and that really it has been a journey. So we talk about political correctness and what was proper in the early days and what was proper in the 70s and the language we use today. And I think it's really about how we talk to each other and how we accept each other. So I think part of it is just to understand what's current, what's politically correct today, and how we can share that with those that we love so that we aren't bullying and we aren't hurting other people's feelings, but more importantly, how we're moving things forward. So it's not just about being polite or being nice. It's about moving all these movements forward so that when we talk about equality, you know, in 20 years, this discussion doesn't need to happen. It's just there. So LGBTQ is kind of a topic that a lot of people aren't clear about. And that terminology is thrown around. The letters can be in different orders. It depends on where you hear it or whose organization it is. So I'm going to go through them just slowly. We'll talk about it, and then, of course, any questions you might have. So we're just going to clear up the nomenclature first, because I think that's really where things start, okay? When we talk about sexual orientation, what does that mean? Sexual orientation is about who you are attracted to, who you're going to focus those same feelings that when you talk about love and committed relationships and long-term commitment, who is that addressed toward? So sexual orientation is about who you love. Gender identity is totally different from that. Gender identity is how you feel about yourself, your mental perspective, okay? And that's a very different thing. And then finally, there's sexual or sexuality. That's simply what's between your legs. It's not necessarily related to how you identify yourself. So we know that there's that entire spectrum, but I think it's just important to understand that when we talk about sexual orientation, it's who do you want to have that long-term relationship with? Who are you going to be attracted to, both emotionally and physically? All right, so does that seem pretty clear at this point? Good. So let's do the letters of the alphabet. I've always said I don't understand why the straight community doesn't get any of them. They just get to take heterosexual, and then they don't have to explain anything. We, on the other hand, get a lot of letters on our side of the column. So I'm going to do it in the order of LGBTQ and A. L, lesbian, women who are attracted to women. Just that simple. Gay, men who are attracted to men.
B.
Oh, I couldn't remember which order I started ahead. B is bisexual. I think that's a very confusing identification for a lot of people because they think it's just a cop-out or they think it's an excuse to be promiscuous. I think they do. So really, if someone is bisexual, it means that they can at any one given time be attracted to a person of their same sex or an opposite sex. Generally not at the same time. It's not permission for anything else. People who truly identify as bisexual have a very hard time because there's even prejudice within the LGBT community about that because it's so misunderstood. So it just means that, you know, I have the capacity to be attracted to, I'm not bisexual, but to be attracted to either men or women, okay? And then finally the T, which I think is the most misunderstood terminology of all, transgender. It's something that nobody talked about for years and years and years and years, and now it's up front. For the transgender community, they have a 28% higher rate of suicide than any other population in the world. That's pretty phenomenal. So what transgender really means is that regardless of the sex that you were born with, what was between your legs, how you mentally identify yourself. So it's your gender identity. So for many people, it means that their physical body does not match their mental picture of themselves. And what a confusing thing for a kid. You know, when you think about yourself or your children or whatever as you've gone through life, that is such a confusing time to start with as you discover your own sexuality. So when you think about transgender youth in this country and what they have to go through and what their families go through and how they try to identify, it's really a pretty difficult situation. So there's lots of stages of transgender. There are people who cross-dress, and that just simply means that they're comfortable in expressing themselves that way, okay? There are people who actually physically do a transformation. They do a physical transformation. Cher's son, Chaz Bono, I think is somebody everybody saw on Dancing with the Stars last year. He chose to do a physical transformation because that was a better way for him to feel comfortable. And then the big unasked question is, well then who do they sleep with? Right? That's what everybody wants to know. The idea, remember, is that how you identify mentally is simply who you are then inside. That's your personal persona. You can still then be attracted and have a sexual orientation toward same gender, opposite gender, or bisexual. So one does not discriminate the other. So people who transgender, who do an actual physical transformation, frequently will stay with the same partner they had prior to the surgery. So if it was a male-female marriage and one of those people transgenders so that they're now both sexually the same, the relationship may still work because the affection, that emotional relationship, stays the same. So one does not eliminate the other. And I know it's confusing. I really do understand that it's confusing. Then we have, and I have to say this is even new in my vernacular, something that's now being described as genderqueer. It's a term that you hear much more frequently with the younger population because they are less willing to define themselves by traditional standards. So genderqueer means that you identify, or parts of you identify, with both sexes. So we used to use horrible words like sissy or dyke or things like that. In today's generation, a 20-something would probably describe themselves as genderqueer. They would say, I see parts of that in myself on both sides of that issue. And then comes the A, which I hope you all are here today, is allies. And those are simply the rest of the world that we hope will support the individuality and creativeness and equality that's represented through all these sexual orientation issues. The most important thing today when we look at this issue politically, and I'm going to answer your question before you ask it, which is more important, education, no, how did you say it?
Regulation or education?
Regulation or education, absolutely both.
Yeah.
It will not come without it. When we look at the Civil Rights Act, do you think things would have changed without it?
No.
They barely changed with it. So, you know, it takes time, but at least there's something then to enforce. Today the Senate passed a bill called ENDA. Employment Non-Discrimination Act. Do you know how long that's been going around? It's a dead loser in the House. It will never get through the House. Boehner's already said it'll never come for a vote. But the important thing here about this issue,
We got rid of it.
Well, bangers,
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lifelong seat.
Sorry.
but that issue's been around for a long time. And the important thing is, we can identify with all these letters. We can get community support. We can get family support. But if you go to work and your job is not protected because you want to come out and say who you are, I call it bring your whole self to work. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we be able to bring our whole self to work? And if it's a racial issue or a disability issue, you're already outed. So we have to ask our LGBTQ youth, first of all, to self-declare, which is a pretty tough issue. And then we have to say, but your job's not protected because of who you love or how you identify with your body. Not right. So I see it's both, and I think unless we educate, the voters are never going to regulate. So I think it's really important that we look at that as a kind of across-the-board issue. And I think it's confusing, and I think the more we can talk about it, the better. But equality is equality. And I think everybody at this table would agree to that, so.
A right for one is a right for all.
That's correct. Sure is. Yes.
Do you want to speak to, there's sort of some emerging discourse about people who identify as asexual,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody wants to claim them. You know, because, for whatever reason. So, do you have any?
But I think that's again about your sexual orientation.
Right.
So somebody who says I'm asexual, and I totally believe it. I mean, I think we've all known people, you know, so sometimes they were just in the closet, which is why they lived that life. But some people do not have a strong sexual affinity. I'm guessing it probably fits somewhere on another scale, you know, like some kind of a social interactive scale that declines that, or there's a medical reason why there's low hormonal responses to things, or maybe you're just burnt out. I don't know. And maybe that's a period in your life where you do that. But again, I think it's respecting that ability to have the personal interaction.
But isn't it true though that most of the people that object to homosexuality is not necessarily the individual, it's the actual act. It's just like I think that we have downplayed, if you want to look at it from a biblical standpoint, we've downplayed the act of adultery. We downplayed the act of fornication. And all of this is tied in scripturally together. So we can't say one is wrong without saying all of them are wrong.
Well, first of all, we cannot assume that everyone follows the tenets of Christianity.
No, I'm not
So-
saying that.
Right. So if we really believe that, we're not discriminating against people who fornicate or adulterate or things like that legislatively. We're not saying, you know what, you have a history of adultery, you no longer get to have job security.
Well, it should be.
No.
Yeah, because like, okay,
Private life.
the same people that passed the bill stating that you can't do this and that, one day it was passing a law saying that because I'm black, the law said that I was not a human.
That's right.
The law said they're gonna lynch me. Okay, now those same religious folks were saying that.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say, the question I'm trying to ask you, if your community would bring all of the supposedly the moral sins to the forefront and say, now let's deal with all of them and leave my particular one alone. Either deal with all of them or none at all.
I still think that that brings it forward as a religious issue.
Well, it is.
And
That's what it's going to be. So that's what.
I think
that's
there's
what I'm-
bias in many religious communities against homosexuality. That I will agree to. But I do not think that this is a religious issue. I think it's very much of a civil or a civil rights issue.
Well, even with the civil rights, if we look at the civil rights, my civil rights end when it infringes on his. That's legal. If my rights,
But
and it goes
what's
right
in,
back to
I think
bullying.
you have to define infringement. So,
Well, scripturally, if you offend me, I have to feel that I'm offended. Then you have to accept what I say that you offended me.
but,
The same thing with
but
his
we
rights.
do have a separation between how we legislate and what our individual religious choices are.
I understand
And I
that.
don't think that we can impose any one religious pattern on anyone else.
See, then all of this still depends on the color of the person's skin. Once we legislate, even the religious part of it.
Well, you can hide the color of your skin, there's no question
never
about
tried.
it. So you, no, what I'm saying suggestively that you can. So that means you are always gonna be interpreted racially and subject to bias by someone who chooses to have that prejudice.
See, but it shouldn't be, because the first thing the religious community want to holler is that our country was founded upon God. Our forefathers found this country on the Bible. That's the biggest.
Our forefathers founded this country on the idea of religious freedom.
Yes.
I mean, the Pilgrims did not say, here's the Bible and this is what we're gonna legislate according to.
Once we research that, my sister, you find that the Pilgrims had a shotgun in one hand and a Bible in the other.
That's the truth too.
No, so come on, let's be real.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of people would be okay, or, okay with like lesbian, gay, LGBTQ, as long as they're not really actively being gay, lesbian. I think because of the different religions and stuff like that, I think, but that kind of
See, I don't
falls
even know
into
what that
everything
means
else.
to actively be. You either
No.
are or you are. You're either black or you're not.
Like I'm okay. No, you're right. But some people's mindset is like, I don't care if you're gay, but don't sodomize. That sort of thing, or don't that sort of thing.
It's like what you're saying,
And
it's
don't
like
act
don't
on it.
be
It's like
openly,
Cattle call.
openly gay.
Yeah, and
Is
that's
that what
what
you're talking about?
One at a time, please.
Oh.
Good discussion. That's a cop-out. That's okay.
Excuse me?
I said, that's a cop-out. Hate the sin, love the sin. That's a cop-out. You're one unit, and all are sinners. So the evangelicals just lose credibility with regard to that. I've been listening to that all my life.
Could you repeat that, sir?
Evangelicals have their battle cry is hate the sin, love the sinner.
That's true.
We're all sinners.
We're all sinners.
Right.
It comes in
We're all
one
sinners.
package.
But you hate the
It's
sin,
like getting married. It's like, are you going to change? Oh yeah, I love my wife. Get married, and I'm going to change it once we get married. Don't.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't work, because you have to change for yourself. Because you want to change.
That's
Right,
the
so
answer
if you
right
want
there.
to change for yourself, that's one choice, but if
That's
you
the
don't want to
answer to your
change.
question.
You're not going to change because a Christian community suggests that you should. I think that's true for most of us, regardless of what the issue is.
It's just like adultery and fornication. We never stopped that because the Christian community said we shouldn't do that. That's been going on ever since we left the garden.
Right?
And
So
it's still going
clearly
on.
that's not working. The don't do it method doesn't work.
You cannot turn on Sunday morning TV and these major ministries where there is a divorce within the ranks of either that generation, the prior generation, or a later generation of those individuals.
I mean, I have to look objectively when we're just talking about the ENDA issue, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. What about that can possibly be offensive to any community? I really do not understand it. What difference does it make? People do not bring their sexuality to the workplace anymore when they're gay or straight. You know what? If you're inappropriate at work, you're inappropriate at work, period. You know, it has nothing to do with which side of this particular fence you're sitting on.
Are you aware of the gentleman back in the 70s, in the 70s and early 80s, that had the sex change that worked over in Shelby and Julie?
I am not. Is that local? No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Speaking of the 70s, back in the 70s, they couldn't even get the amendment to the Constitution ratified that gave women equal.
Thank you, and we still haven't.
No, and they still haven't.
It was either the 70s
And
or
they
early 80s,
couldn't-
he did have a sex change.
There were 28
Still
words
not
to that
equal.
amendment, and nothing was offensive that they couldn't get it ratified.
It is offensive, and it's interesting because I just spoke to the 1,200 feminist women at the YWCA event 2 weeks ago talking about the L word in feminism. And it's really, today we're still fighting that exact same issue because we have become very politically conservative again. So we're still not dealing with a lot of those issues. We still have not passed an equal rights amendment. Women still make 70 cents on the dollar unless you're a black woman and you make 44 cents on the dollar. So, you know, that hasn't changed since 1974. So we're still fighting the same things, and I think the whole point of this kind of a forum is to get some equality.
How many states in the last 10 years have ratified same-sex marriages?
14 yesterday with Illinois. And Ohio was the first state to pass a state constitutional amendment banning it.
Right.
Well, of course.
We couldn't wait to get to the polls on that.
You can't smoke in a restaurant.
You know, we mandate everything, don't we? We do. So, yes.
You were talking about genderqueer and about like 20-somethings, that's a new thing. I'm in college, and so that is something I hear a lot on campus. Can you like re-explain it and go further into depth? Because for me, queer has like historically had negative connotations. So to hear someone say I'm queer, it's just like, why are you saying that about yourself? That's like an awful thing to say. So what does it
Okay, well, I'm going to
actually
give you the
mean?
span of my lifetime, which
Okay.
is pretty long. When I grew up, queer meant odd.
Okay, right.
Oh, that's so queer. And then it took on that homosexual relationship. So queer became very negative, and it was used as a bullying or a derogatory term. Then we got gay, and then, you know, everybody with the songs of like the gay parade and everything, everybody was all confused about that, because what does gay mean? But queer kept that kind of negative orientation. And quite honestly, it's used in the LGBT community the way a lot of racial epithets are used in the black community. So, you know, it's like, oh, you're so queer. And, you know, you might hear that. It's just as negative, but people will say it to each other. Now, people are trying to take some of this specificity of the rest of the terms away. They're trying to neutralize themselves a little bit to just say, you know what, I'm not straight. I think people are a little tired of this ending alphabet that we have, that you have to start, you know, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Well, when you're 20-something, maybe you really don't even know what you are. And maybe you're just saying, I'm not straight. Maybe that's what they're trying to say here. And I think that's the generational thing that I'm seeing now when I talk to young people about, I don't know that I want to identify as a lesbian, because it's still very distinctive, and it's this, and it's got some historic connotation with it. Or I don't know that I want to identify as a bisexual, because, you know, maybe it really was just dipping in the lily pond and I'm not really there, I don't know. I mean, that's what college is about, right? That's what high school or early youth is about. So I think that's the difference. I think they're just saying, I don't want to take the burden of that entire alphabet.
Okay, so like they don't want to be in a, just like the check box, like that I'm lesbian.
I think they just want to say I'm not straight.
Okay.
So maybe they're getting back to the original definition of queer as odd. I'm different, instead of, you know, I am what I grew up with, you know, was started out with you with the queer being an odd word, and then, you know.
And then it was homosexual.
Yeah. So.
And in those days, we didn't really allow for the rest of that spectrum. And sexuality is a spectrum. And I think that's the one thing that kids are much more attuned to, and they are so not apologetic for who they are today. And they come out and they say, you know what? If I want to live in a world where I can put my girlfriend's picture on my desk, I'm going to put my girlfriend's picture on my desk. If I want to live in a world where I can hold hands or bring her home for dinner or whatever, they're just going to do it. They are not apologetic about who they are and the support. I think our hugest group of allies is among the young, which is why many of these things that we're talking about needing to be legislated will happen, because as soon as enough people start to vote, if we can get those kids to the polls for a lot of our issues, those things will happen. Kids aren't judgmental.
The younger generation isn't hung up on X factors, your gender, your race, your heritage, your socioeconomic status, your identity.
It's irrelevant.
Whatever X factor, they're not hung up on that. They care about who you are, not some X factor.
Yeah. And they're willing to listen to who you
Until
are.
they get 35 and then they begin to change.
We have a
We
question
all
here.
change.
Matt.
We all change.
Hold on,
I mean,
we have
and
a
that's
question here.
true.
Back.
we're getting close to the end of time, but I'm gonna make sure everything's addressed.
One more,
One
right here, right here.
As a straight person,
Alright, watch
I shouldn't say queer.
No, I don't think so. I don't know that I don't know that there's any unacceptable language. Really the negativity is really around transgender. So don't use words like tranny
Oh
or
my gosh, no.
he, she, or the she,
They
it,
play on the
or,
same team, is that bad?
is it what?
They play on the same team.
I think all those little euphemisms are just fine, because I think it's gonna show on your face where your message is coming
I think
from.
it's in the manner that you're actually saying it too.
And again, when people are really negative and bullying, you know, I think one of the greatest things to come in this generation is something called the Gaystraight alliances that are happening in high schools. 2 years ago in Franklin County, we had 2. There are now 30 high schools participating in that.
There's thousands across the country now, thousands.
And those are the kids that are teaching each other how they want to be treated. And you know what? If you meet somebody, how would you like to be addressed? It's just that simple. You know, in the old days, we used to call everybody Mr. and Mrs. Well, I don't answer to Mrs. Oh, I just got married after 44 years in New York on October 1st in the same church that my mother got married in 1927. So,
Were they there?
no, well, in spirit, I hope.
Oh, good.
Passed away, but in spirit. So,
Congratulations.
thank you.
I just wonder about one thing. If 2 male frogs had been put in the pond, that's where we all came from. And where was the rest
So I
of
can't
it?
hear the question.
About 2 male frogs. Well, truthfully, science is very adaptive, and evolution has been very adaptive in how you feel about it. But there are many animal species, many, who have incidences of homosexuality or have transformational gender-specific
I read about it.
parts. So if there were 2 males in the pond and we needed to procreate, one of those male frogs is gonna go in instead of out. And eventually we're gonna have little baby frogs. It might take some time, but that's exactly, I think, what nature has proved to us that will happen. And you know what? It's a religious indicator that says that we have to procreate. There are a lot of couples who choose not to. And in a world that is exploding with population, I don't think you have to worry about some LGBT people not having babies. Although it's getting to be a much bigger percentage of our population that says we deserve to be parents as well.
The scripture doesn't say you have to.
Right, so.
I haven't read it, but it says you
Yeah,
have to.
doesn't.
It says better to marry than to bury. You know, and it also explains that some of us doesn't have the desire to do it. It's just some made that way, God made them that way, and some chose to be made by man. So it's been.
Unless you're Catholic, and then, you know, you're not supposed to stop that natural process. So I think all of those things are open to interpretation.
And I'm gonna step up and just interject here briefly, and make sure I'm doing my job in a couple of areas. Number one, there's these blank cards at the back. Please fill those out if you would. We're gonna use those maybe for a short discussion afterwards, but also to collect some data and get a better perspective. Excuse me, as soon as everyone's ready, we'll continue forward. Typically, when I do forums, I like to hear one person speaking at a time so that we're not talking over top of each other. And because I want to make a couple important points